you come at base 55 Sierra.
Cherokee 3 November Delta, say parking.
I would like to request to Dolphin Aviation, November 3 November Delta.
Cherokee 443 November Delta, roger, turn right on Alpha 5, then a right turn on Alpha to Dolphin with me.
Then right to Alpha 5 and then right again to Alpha for Dolphin Aviation, November 3 November Delta.
He was born and raised in Ybor City at the time where Ybor City was very separate from Tampa. It was a immigrant community, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Italian. As he said, like, you know, everything around here was Italian. People were talking Italian. His mom was working in the packing plant. His dad was a tailor. He described himself as a latchkey kid, and he was just going to school, coming back, coming home to nobody, just opened the door and just basically was very happy when he got his bicycle so he could run around Ybor City. And you learn, as his famous sentence, he said, you know, I was scared my whole entire youth, and that's why. What I did is I figured out the only way around it is figure out what you're afraid of and you face it right in the face and you punch it right in the face. And that's how you do it. And that's kind of the way he lived his life. Is like anytime, any kind of fear, he just faced it straight on.
Actually, when I first met Ron, when I came here, we started out in kind of a shaky ground. There were some existing lawsuits going on between Dolphin Aviation and the Airport Authority. But over time, he started to ease up. We settled the issue. He dropped the lawsuit as we became familiar with each other, and he understood that we weren't trying to do anything to harm his business. He was very protective of Dolphin, obviously. And then as our relationship grew, him and I became friends. We would spend time together just discussing issues over in his office, and whenever you discussed an issue with Ron, it was not a 10-minute conversation. It was probably a 2-hour conversation, and you discuss politics, you discuss aviation, discuss a wide range of issues, what was going on in the community. And then as time went on and we became closer, we would go to some events together, charitable events, to some dinners together with our wives, Shannon and my wife Sally. We became good acquaintances. Had a good business relationship. And the thing that impressed me about Ron is he had the military contract for fuel, which also covered presidential visits and Air Force One. So he had presidents and vice presidents and dignitaries coming to his facility on a regular basis. And what was most interesting with Ron was that through all of that, while he was cordial and nice to them, he never seemed overly impressed, even with presidents being there. And the time that I saw Ron the most impressed was, as I said, we'd go to dinners together sometimes, and the airport's a sponsor of what's called the Tony Jannus Award. And so every year there'd be this award to a real icon in the aviation industry. And back a few years ago, the recipient that year was Captain Sullenberger, the Sully who landed in the Hudson. And so Ron and Shannon joined us and some other friends of ours at the table that we had. And as part of the sponsorship, you got to have your picture taken with the recipient. And I never saw such a big smile on Ron's face as when we were going to meet with Captain Sullenberger. And it really goes back to what I really think Ron is. Ron was a pure aviator. Everything else, he would be involved in politics, he'd be involved in charitable efforts and all that. But I think at the core of Ron was aviation and being an aviator. And he just loved flying, he loved pilots, and Sullenberger was the epitome of the best pilot for what heroic action he took and how he saved all those people landing in the Hudson, which is still kind of unbelievable. So I'd say that's my biggest memory of Ron, and his biggest moment that I had with him, have a picture taken with Captain Sullenberger.
Good friends are hard to come by and more difficult to keep. But with a guy like Ron, you could always count on his generosity, his goodwill, his desire to talk, if you knew him well. And he and I used to have these little marathon sessions of coffee over at Morton's where we would discuss the world, but mostly politics. And he would get in my face with his strong will, and he would start poking, and he would poke, and he would poke. And I'd come home and I'd open my shirt and I'd have these little red dots on my chest because he made a point, you knew he made a point, and he was very smart, and he always was able to back up his points. until one day I finally had all the evidence accumulated that I could, where I could argue a point that I knew he was wrong on. And he kept going and going and going. I said, Ron, wait a minute. I said, if I agree with you, we'll both be wrong. So that was what silenced him. There wasn't much that would silence him. And a good guy, great guy. We traveled together. We went to a lot of political events all over the country. And he was always there. He was always willing to step up. And he was a rugged individualist, and we don't have many of those anymore. He had strong will, strong beliefs, stuck to his beliefs, and carried out his ethics in a way that I found was true to himself.
He loved racing, loved anything that went fast. You know, the go fast, be happy was his motto, and he definitely did that. I've had a lot of people that would go to lunch with Ron, and after that they would drive separately. So he'd get there a little quick. So definitely like speed. Same thing with the boat, stuff like that. We're just, you know, you go a little fast. We'll get there quick. It beats you up, but you get there quick. Well, it's better than going an hour across the bay. Yeah, you get there in 15 minutes, but now you're sore. But that's what he loved to go fast.
The most interesting part is I used to tell him, how did you get in aviation? Is it something that you wanted to do since you were a kid? And, you know, really yes and no. It was because his fascination was speed, like any kind that was heavy metal that could be in there, boats, cars, airplane. And the story, actually, the first time he took a flight, this funny story, a friend of his was in Tampa, was taking flight lesson, and had just soloed, which means he could fly the aircraft by himself, but definitely not take any passengers with him. And he sneaked Ron into a flight. So his first flight was actually a flight he should have never been in. And from the first time he got in the airplane, that was it. He was convinced. He became a pilot, a private pilot, a flight instructor, and then was hired actually by Dolphin Aviation as a flight instructor back in the late 60s, early 70s. And he worked for them for a while. Then he became an aircraft salesperson, where he excelled at the biggest aircraft sales for Piper aircraft. It was very humbling because he was given the award at Madison State Garden in front of everybody else in New York, and he said he was like, "Wow, the little kid from Florida, you know, up there." He said it was a big deal in the 70s. So that's how he started, and then he basically he bought Dolphin in the mid 80s, and he transformed it into what's today, which is like basically the premier FBO in Sarasota, and a place where that's known throughout the world in aviation. The way he did it, which is quite amazing, is typical Ron. When everybody had a way of doing things, Ron had his way of doing things. Which was sometimes part crazy, part genius. You know, wherever the needle points, but the results are here. A maintenance facility, a flight school, a pilot shop, a charter business, but pumping fuel, you know, and having the facility. He said, you know, I really make money when I pump fuel and I rent offices. So he transformed Dolphin from this single entity to basically an airport's commerce center. That's his word. So inside Dolphin Aviation today, it's like something like 25 different businesses.
Ron was one of the smartest people I've ever known. And he had a wealth of knowledge on a wide spectrum of topics. And I would sometimes ask him, how do you know that? Well, usually he had read a book or an article, or he'd watched the History Channel or National Geographic. And that wealth of information and ability to answer your questions was probably never more interesting nor entertaining than when we were traveling. You know, you're in a different city, different country, and questions come up. You know, what is this? What's the history? And Ron frequently had the answer, and we enjoyed that. And we were on a cruise in 2004, as I recall, in the Mediterranean. and he was providing a lot of great information. And at one point, he just burst out laughing and admitted that part of the time he just made it up. Now that created an opportunity for a lot of fun and interest as the rest of the trip, trying to decide when Ron was pulling our leg and when he actually had an answer. And the culmination, as I recall, was we were in Amalfi, Italy, and the four of us, Shannon, my wife Alex, and I, and Ron, were standing around this statue and wondering, what's this a statue of? What is this? So Ron immediately said, who was kind of standing around the other side, he said, well, this is the man who invented the compass. Well, this sounded an awful lot like one of Ron's made-up stories. So I said, and how exactly do you know that? And he looked at me with his devilish grin and he says, it says so right here on the plaque.
I know that Ron was a big supporter of education in aviation, and that's why I say he was a pure aviator. He believed piloting was a critical function, so he spent a lot of time with scholarships educating children. And the other thing he did is he hosted the Young Eagles program for years and years and years, which was a bunch of pilots that would introduce children to flying and give them a free flight. And in a lot of cases, that would light that fire under that child that, oh, wow, this is really neat. I want to become a pilot. And then later on, they would transition into becoming a pilot and then a commercial pilot. So I think Ron had a great love, not just for educating the children, but helping to continue this industry and continue the talent that piloting involves.
So the two basic reasons that I spent time with Ron was the aviation trips to Tallahassee for the FDOT bid lettings and for our involvement at Mote Marine Laboratory. And that's how I got to know him. But one other interesting thing is a lot of people don't know, and it's a well-kept secret really, is that I got Ron interested in the International Chamber Music Festival. It takes place in Sarasota every April, and that's been going on for 37 years now. And I've been involved for the whole 37 years, and I dragged Ron into it. Let's see. That was probably about 10 or 12 years ago. And he became a major sponsor, which not many people knew. And as a major sponsor, he decided he liked chamber music, which kind of floored me a little bit because race car driver, pilot, you know, all the stuff that he does. And one of the things that he always said was, go fast, have fun, because life is too short. And that was one of his favorite sayings. And turns out he had a lot of fun being involved in the La Musica Chamber Music Festival.
I think as a member of our community, Ron was incredibly giving and a very gregarious man. He was also a long-standing member and strong supporter of the Mote family. He was adored by our trustees and our staff alike since he first joined the board in 2001. But Ron also had a great appreciation and understanding, I think, for the importance of person-to-person conversations, very direct engagement with people, looking each other in the eye, shaking hands in order to make truly big things happen. I really enjoyed Ron's company, and I do miss him, as I'm sure all of us do. But I think we can all consider ourselves very, very fortunate to have been able to call Ron a friend. And when we remember Ron, as I often do every time I get on a plane, I smile and I do remember what he said. Go fast and be happy because life is short. And I just would like to say to Ron, cheers to you, Ron, for a life very well lived.
There's a permanent marker there in front of where Dolphin is, and regardless of how long that FBO is there, it'll always be Ciaravella Court. And we thought that was a real appropriate way to memorialize a person who had been here for decades and had really had a great influence and impact on this local community and on the airport itself.